Thank you. Good morning. Thanks for inviting me. Just by way of introduction, what is the European Medicines Agency? For those of you who are not familiar, just think of the FDA, CDER, and CBER. We're in the business of regulating drugs and biologicals. The analogy is not perfect, but broadly it's sufficient for today. So, where do I up? Yeah. I'll try to give us our perspective and a bit of history, recent interesting history we went through. I don't know whether you followed that in the press, probably not on this side of the Atlantic, but we had a bit of an issue with transparency. And we had some unflattering remarks in the press, and it was not a good time. And at the end, it ended with this one here. Has been given a rap over the knuckles by the European Ombudsman. What is the European Ombudsman? The truth is, I don't know exactly what that is. It is an institution that is like a court. It isn't a court, but it's like a court. And you can go there if you have a complaint, and the Ombudsman will then say, you go this way or that way. So we had our experience with this. It's an office. It's also a gentleman, but it's an office. So then we had a lot of press from the not so favorable press again, from the academic community. Maybe some of you have seen this in the British Medical Journal. It details the travails that a group of academics had with us. We dragged our feet. Anyway, it was a long process, and maybe Peter will talk more about that, I don't know. But the end of this was about a 2-year process. The end was pretty transformative. And it's in this sentence. We're a public body. As a public body, like here, we are obliged to be fully transparent. We have to give everything away. If you ask me about a document, you should receive it. Exceptions are if it is personal protected data, that hasn't changed, or if it is commercial confidential information. And the big sea change was this sentence. That's what the Ombudsman said. There is an overriding public health interest, therefore, clinical trial data is no longer considered commercial confidential information. I'm fully aware of the huge implications this has. So, I hear our chairman today, and I saw it on the program, that you were talking about incentives for data sharings. Well, we're beyond that debate. We don't need incentives. That is our legal basis, so fine, we're incentivized. That's behind us. But the next frontier is coming. So, let's go back again and look at this evolution of transparency. And you know all the top bullets up there. The third bullet is access to documents. That's retroactive availability of trial reports. So as of last year, if you asked us, please send us all the clinical trial data of drug X, we would do it. It is a pain in the neck because we would have to redact it to see whether there is personal, not commercial, personal data in there, but you would get it in paper format. So it's there, but it's not very helpful. The next step is we will proactively publish trial reports. There are people who say, you're putting out these, we call them EPARs, European Public Assessment Reports. So when we license a drug, there is an assessment report, like from the FDA. Why don't you put a hyperlink in there electronically where I can click straight on the full trial report? Fine, there's nothing wrong with that. Technically, it's a bit of a challenge, and we're not great with IT, but in principle, we could do it. And the last bullet is, of course, this one. Public availability of raw data. So, say, give us all the line listings, patient-level data. Yes, probably you will get it. I will say, well, not just probably, we will make it available. And the thing is, when we talk about data, it is all the data we own. Not own, but we hold. So that is pre-licensing RCTs, but there will also be pharmacovigilance, observational data, the whole set. So that's where we are going, gingerly. And that puts a number of people outside their comfort zone, because it's playing with data. And you all know that data is like children. You like your own best, and you don't like strangers to play with them. Understandable. So, and industry is particularly, shall we say, outside their comfort zone. It reminds me of a book that I read, and this is a whole new paradigm. And I recommend the book. It's about reinventing discovery. It came out last year. And, excuse me, they're talking about the division of labor, how historically, thanks for that, historically, observation and analysis have been yoked together. You are a researcher, you do the experiment, you analyze it, you report it, end of story. And the exceptions already, to some degree, have been regulated products like medicines, because there you had a second party to reanalyze. That's the regulator. But now we are moving into a completely new age, a new division of labor. If everything is out, everybody can reanalyze, play with it, do whatever they wish to do. So is that a boon or is it a bane for drug development and public health? I will start with the negative so that I can end on a positive note. So don't think I'm just negative. The cons. Of course, there are data protection issues. And the interesting thing is, in our history, recent history, we heard, as I said, from this European Ombudsman, you have to be fully transparent, give it all out. At the same time, we have another European institution, a public institution, that is something called the Data Protection Officer or something. It's another office. And they say, wait. There is personal data protection. So these two public bodies will then have to fight it out how exactly we're going to do this. But that probably can be addressed. I don't think this will be a major issue. What we probably will do, I say probably because I cannot predict the future, but it's most likely. We will tell the industry, look, you have to be aware as of date X that all of your clinical trial data that you submit to us will be available to anybody else. Therefore, ensure that there is no identifiable patient data in there. That's probably the way we have to go. But then there is something, so that's probably an addressable problem. But then there is that second one. Phantom risks, health scares, and we will be blindsided. We don't like that, of course, industry as well. So what we're going to hear or see is a paper in the Lancet Monday morning saying that this drug or this vaccine causes the side effect. Regulator, what are you doing? And our response will be, well, we haven't read the paper. Where is it? So an unpleasant situation. Is that a real risk? I think it is. And I like this paper. I always quote it from my colleagues at FDA who said, well, we have entered an era of increasingly frequent publication of meta-analyses that all show some safety signal, true or false, and there is always this call, regulator, do something. So what we're going to see is many more third-party publications that will drive the agenda. Many of the drugs we licensed will come under attack for true or false reasons. I give you an example of what can go wrong. And I use an example from the US background because this is a US audience. There was a drug that showed to be beneficial. It's tiotropium. It's still on the market. And then there was a meta-analysis in 2008 saying that the relative risk of cardiovascular events is 1.6. And that's classic. You always get these relative risks between 1 and 2. And then what do you do with it? It's observational data or meta-analysis data. So there you are. And that is a real red flag. And that is a risk to a drug that is potentially beneficial. Luckily, in that case, that company had underway a study that looked at the long-term endpoints, the clinical endpoints, and that showed that there was no risk. If you look at the relative risk, it's all below 1, so if anything, it might actually be beneficial. So, but if that study had not been done, I don't know where that drug would be. What will we do in that case? We'll see such cases. And here is another quote that comes from this institution, I like it very much, that was recently published. There will be challenges to achieving or to doing RCTs once there is this red flag of a risk. Why would patients want to enroll? So we will jeopardize perhaps useful treatments that we have. Is that in the interest of public health? No, certainly not. I think it is a real risk. But, so that was the negatives. The positives. What we're going to is open science, basically. Anyone can have any of the data. And that will be a boon for a lot of cutting-edge technologies that are only around the corner that we haven't much experience with. There are predictive models for patient selection to appropriate treatments. You need data-rich sets to substratify patients to find what treatment would be most appropriate for patients with this set of characteristics versus the others. There are a few studies who've done that, but I see a lot of potential in there. Machine learning systems, you take these large data sets to derive new information, again on risk stratification, benefit stratification. Ultimately, you could even think you could match a patient history to a clinical trial data set. So that would be the greatest. If you have a patient, you punch into a computer all the patient variables, and you say for that patient, most likely on that huge data, based on that huge data set, this is the right therapy. And then there is a last thing. I know comparative effectiveness research is high on everybody's agenda. We call it relative efficacy assessment, same thing. And there is the siren songs that we will have head-to-head comparisons. I don't believe in that. It's just too expensive. I don't think it's worthwhile. What we need to is probably indirect comparison assessments. So something along the line of this. We by chance had 3 anticoagulants authorized almost at the same time, both in the US and in Europe. And these people did indirect comparisons. They did not have access to the full data set. They did it based on the aggregate data of clinical trial reports. And if you talk to them and say that is a clear weakness. Have we had the line listings, we could have done probably a much better job. So I think this will be a boon for comparative effectiveness research. So, where are we going? That is now EMA again, European Medicines Agency. We have announced that we will have a workshop on the 22nd of November this year, so in about a month and a half, where at the EMA, there will be 200 people or so. It was open to the public, but now it's already, we're oversubscribed, so you can no longer apply for a seat. Where we will invite pretty much everybody, all our stakeholders, industry, Cochrane collaborations, critics, public citizen advocates, whoever. And there will be a podium discussion, and it will be a free-for-all. And we will just listen. We will not talk too much, because we will have to develop our own policy, how we make those data available. And we want to establish a working relationship with those stakeholders who are willing to engage. So what are we likely going to do? And again, I say likely because I cannot predict the future. Look at the first statement here. While protecting the decision-making process, that is polite code for saying, okay, you will get the data once we have assessed it. Once we have reached a decision, then we make it available. What we don't want is analysis come up while we're still in the assessment process. And we see papers, I don't know, in the equivalent of the New York Times or whatever, saying that they should never authorize this because it's dangerous, they should, or whatever. That is not helpful to fulfill our role. So once the decision has been made, the drug has been licensed or rejected, then we will let it out. And what we will have to develop jointly, probably with our stakeholders, is the standards for storing and sharing of data. I think you just said it's very difficult technically. I think it will be. It's not trivial, but it will be doable. So the technical part will be addressable. We will have to debate the level of data to be released. And I know, again, I was asked not to talk about raw data, but that's where we are now. Nobody knows really at what level that should go out. Should it be individual MR readings or CT readings? All open. We have to debate the standards for protection of personal data. That's a no-brainer, of course. We will maybe have to discuss, that's more critical already, the quality standards. If someone wants to do meta-analysis, comparative efficacy assessments based on these indirect comparisons, what are quality standards? Should there be a voluntary standard by which everybody should abide? And then the last one, that is probably the most critical. Rules of engagement. You could say, yes, you can have it. All the data are out there, but it's not just you take it, you have to give something before you take it. So it could be open but filtered. What we want, basically, is a pre-registration of protocols. What we want to avoid by that is data dredging. So I get all the data on one drug, I let my computer program run overnight, I program it in such a way to stop when it has any finding at the p less 0.05 level. I wake up in the morning, I have my breakfast, and I write my paper. That's not what we want to see. So, tell us what you're going to look at. Are you going to do an exploratory study or a confirmatory study? Deposit the protocol, and then you have it. But all of that will need to be hammered out. So we are in that process. If you want to watch our meeting on the 22nd of November, it will be webcast. There's limited spaces, I think, but it will also be recorded. So you will, in December, you can have it and watch it on our website. Okay, thanks for that.